Our gospel reading this morning is from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. You all already know what this story is. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men, an oxymoron, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, Where is the child who's been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage. When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, In Bethlehem of Judea. For so it has been written by the prophet, And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means the least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, Go and search diligently for the child. And when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage. When they had heard the king, they sent out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, he offered them gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. Epiphany is hard to define. It's hard to define because different places observe the day differently. The one thing that we all have in common is that we observe it on January 6th. Except, of course, if January 6th isn't on a Sunday, we don't observe it until there is a Sunday for us to observe it. In the Eastern Church, it is Christmas. It is the day when the light is revealed, the Epiphany, the coming of the light, when God is made manifest, the incarnation. And so our brothers and sisters in the churches from the East, like the Russian Orthodox, the Greek Orthodox, etc., they are celebrating Christmas today. Now, we've already celebrated on December 25th. Today, we celebrate the coming of the Magi as the primary purpose of the day. There are some churches who combine the Magi with Jesus' baptism. We don't do that. It's confusing enough having the Magi come after we've already been to the temple when Jesus was 12, a week after he was born. And confusion bothers me. So we don't celebrate Jesus' baptism. We will celebrate that next week. Now, I was asked before the service started, what in the world are you preaching on with a title like Perfect Examples? Well, first of all, there are no perfect examples. But there are a couple of pretty good examples here in our story today. The first example is the example of the Magi. Now, when I was reading it said wise men, I said that was an oxymoron. But these guys weren't oxymorons because they actually did stop and ask for directions. There are no wise men today. So they see a star. They might have been magicians, they might have been astronomers, they might have been astrologers, but they studied the skies, and they saw something different. And in their tradition and in their understanding and studying the skies, when there was something different, it meant that something important was happening on earth because something important was happening in the sky. And oftentimes they associate it with the birth of someone really important. So 1, 2, 3, 4, or 10 of the Magi There's only 3 gifts, but we don't know how many magi there are. Decide to follow the star and see wherever it led. That is a perfect example of the life of faith. We see something that will lead us to where we can find God, where we can find Jesus, where we can find the light of the world. And rather than ignore it and say, oh, it's just another star in the sky, we say, no, let's see where that leads us to. Because surely God is incarnate today someplace. And if we follow our star, we will come to that place. And we too will fall down on our knees and worship. And we too will bring our gifts. Perhaps not frankincense, gold, and myrrh, but the gifts of our time, the gifts of our talent, the gifts of our friendship and love. Now, if that's the perfect example of faith, following our star, which really is not our star, it's Christ's star, the perfect example of fear is Herod. Herod was a vicious, evil ruler. He killed his own sons so that they couldn't become king, because he wanted to be king as long as he could be. We should not be surprised that he felt threatened when the Magi came and said, we're looking for the king of the Jews. Herod was the king of the Jews. But he was smart enough to know that he wasn't the only king of the Jews. So he asked for help. Where's the Messiah going to be born? This one who's coming as the king of the Jews. And his scribes tell him to Bethlehem, and he sends them to Bethlehem. And he says, oh, I want to go and worship too. So be sure you come back and let me know, because I can go worship the new king. Not likely. The Magi go and discover where God is incarnate in this earth on that day. And they're so struck that they fall down on their knees and they worship, and they do give the gifts that they have brought with them. Not only were they perceptive enough to see a star and follow it, but they were perceptive enough to have a dream and follow it. A dream that they shouldn't go back and see Herod, that that's the worst thing they could do. Once again, showing the faith of the wise men. And when they don't come back, Herod, in mounting fear, just like the Pharaoh, when Moses leads the people to liberation, the king of Israel orders the killing of every male child under 2 years old. This is not a nice man. And why? If he was afraid that his 2 sons might replace him as king, imagine how afraid he was that the Messiah might have come to replace him. And it is out of fear that he responds. Perfect example, if you will, of fear. Our lives as lives of faith, our lives that look for where God is at work in the world today. We gaze at the stars that are all around us. Not all of them in the sky, some of them in this room, some of them elsewhere. And we follow those faithful stars. And in following, we discover the one who is in the world to make the world whole. And we join in that work. And there is a reason that Scripture refers to this one as the Prince of Peace. Because peace is the essence of the human heart. We desire peace more than we desire love. Because we can't stand conflict. And we know that war does not solve anything. And in following the star, we become workers for peace in this world and in our lives. Our